Welcome everyone to the State Department on this fine, though chilly, Tuesday. I don't have anything at the top, so over to you, Mr. Lee.
I don't really have anything huge, but I did want to ask about, since the Secretary is headed to Bahrain, right, this week?
That's right, yeah.
Yes. Do you know what his plans are for meetings in Bahrain? Not the Gulf, not the GCC meetings, but does he have meetings planned with, civil society and opposition types there, or is he just meeting with Bahraini officials?
It's a fair question. I don't have the details of his schedule yet. We'll try to get that for you. I just don't, beyond, as you said, the
Right.
meetings with the GCC. I can imagine we'll have follow-on meetings, but I just don't have the details yet.
Do you have any anything to say about the current situation in Bahrain as it relates to the treatment of activists and others?
Nothing particularly new. I mean, we've long spoken about our concerns about the political climate in the democratic or political environment in Bahrain, and our concerns about continued actions against civil society.
And you would expect the Secretary to raise those?
I would expect him to raise those just as he would in any with any government around the world. If we do have concerns, we do raise them.
Okay, and then I just wanted to, I don't know if the U.S. or the Department has spoken to this, but in Japan, the Japanese have announced that the Secretary will be going to the Hiroshima Memorial, and I'm just wondering if that is correct from your. So I think they said he would be going as part of the broader group to pay their respects.
That is correct. So he will participate, obviously, in the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, and then he intends to join Foreign Minister Kishida, as well as other G7 foreign ministers in visiting the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park and Museum.
All right, and does he have anything special planned to do other than just to go? And does he? Will he speak?
No, no, I don't believe he has any plans to speak or do a separate event other than to join the other ministers. If that changes, we'll of course let you know. I think it's just it's an effort to honor the memory of all those who died during World War II and underscore President Obama's vision of a nuclear-free or a world rather without nuclear weapons.
All right, that's all.
Good.
Do you have any?
Leslie.
Hello.
Been a long time.
Yep.
Did you miss me? Come on, it's okay. Sorry, I'm just teasing. Anyway, go ahead.
Do you have any? And it feels like déjà vu.
It does. Yes.
Do you have any confirmation that the Syrian peace talks are going to resume on the 11th?
I do. Well, I mean, we do. We have seen that the UN plans to resume talks in Geneva next Monday on April 11th, and certainly we recognize Special Envoy de Misture's leadership. We also understand that he is actually in Moscow today for preparatory discussions prior to resuming negotiations.
And
phone call today, sorry.
That's okay.
Any phone call between Kerry and Lavrov today?
Belisa, Secretary Kerry's had a pretty busy morning. No. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong date. I apologize. No, nothing today.
Really?
Of course.
Did he have a pretty busy morning on the day that you were looking at too?
No, there's no
Every
phone
morning
calls.
is pretty busy.
Every morning, but as you saw, he was quite busy up in New York.
And given that
Sorry.
de Mistura is the envoy is in Moscow, are you making any headway as far as the political transition and specifically the issue of Assad being one of the main topics now going into the second round?
Well, as we've been very clear that our expectation is that these upcoming negotiations will address or take up the core issue of this political transition. Excuse me. Where we stand on it. We don't believe that Assad has the legitimacy to be any kind of leader of his people going forward. We, however, respect the process and the right of the HNC as well as the regime to negotiate what this political transition and its modalities and its timeline look like going forward. But we're going to continue to stand by and support the HNC in Geneva in support of its demands.
Is anyone from the States, from the State Department or the U.S. going? to these
I would
discussions?
imagine that Special Envoy Ratney would be there. I think he's been at every one, at least for some portion of the negotiations. If that's incorrect, I'll correct it. I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted
Yeah,
to,
man.
what you said just then, that you respect the right of the HNC and the
I'm just
and
saying-
of the regime.
sorry, let me-
I mean, if this is a guy whose government
Let me-
who has lost all legitimacy and lost all credibility to run, how does he have a right to?
I'm saying the
negotiate?
regime, and this is what we're saying. Let me rephrase that and just
Well, you
say,
don't-
we respect, let me finish. We respect these talks and their goal of creating a political transition and a timeline for that transition. So all I'm simply stating is our position on Assad and his legitimacy to be a future leader of Syria is well known. That notwithstanding, we do believe that this is to be negotiated by the parties in Geneva, and we respect that process. That's all I'm saying.
But has there been some, you guys have come to the conclusion that the regime no longer represents Assad, the person, the man?
Not at all, Matt, but I am recognizing that this is a process set up by the UN and Staffan de Mistura. Okay, got it. Yeah, no, sorry if that was,
Right of the regime.
sorry if that came out.
Previous rounds of talks have often involved in parallel a meeting of the ISSG. You may not have travel to announce, but are there plans in the immediate future to hold
Not
an
at this
ISSG
time,
meeting?
no, I don't have anything to announce.
On Assad's future, the
Yes.
Kremlin has said today that the fate of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad should be decided by the Syrian people, and conditions for such a decision should be created. Are you on the same page now with the Kremlin on the future of President Assad?
This is what the Kremlin said.
Yes.
Look, I mean, yes, I'm in the sense that we agree and have been very clear about this, that, one of the goals of these negotiations, these proximity talks, whatever you want to refer to them as, is to create the modalities for this political transition. We've been very clear about that. All I'm simply was saying to Matt is we respect that that's something that the parties involved in those negotiations need to work out. Ultimately, it is something for the Syrian people to decide the future of their country. Certainly, we support that. Please, Pam.
That means you agree on the Kremlin statement on
In
Assad's
essence, we
future.
believe that, yes, we believe that a political process that reflects the desires and will of the Syrian people is what should ultimately decide the future leadership and the future government of Syria. Please.
And this is the
Sorry,
first
go
time
ahead.
that you are on the same page with Russia on the future of President Assad?
Look, I mean, we have agreed broadly with Russia on a number of aspects of resolving the Syrian conflict. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are today. We have differed certainly on Assad's future. That hasn't changed. We believe he's not legitimate, or he's not a legitimate future leader for the country. All that said, and our position notwithstanding, we do believe that the process set up by the ISSG, by the UN, to create a political transition is valid and should be respected. Please, Pam.
Is it your understanding that the upcoming round will again be proximity talks? And then if so, what is the U.S. position in the framework of the ISSG on when the transition needs to take place to direct talks?
Both good questions. I don't have clarity on whether these would actually begin as or transition to away from proximity talks. My sense is that they would at least begin as proximity talks again. But again, we want the focus of this next round of talks to be on the details of what a political transition would look like, certainly under the terms of UN Security Council Resolution 2254 and the Geneva Communique. And that's something Secretary Kerry spoke about when he met with Foreign Minister Lavrov last month. But as to whether we we can't predict, frankly, whether there would be direct talks at this point. I'd refer you to De Mistura for that.
Will the Kurds participate this time, do you think?
I think it's just the members of the HNC, is my understanding at this point. It's the same grouping, the same members of the HNC who participated in the previous round. Please.
Do you have a readout of the call between Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Kishida that took place?
I think I
yesterday?
do. It was from a couple of days ago, right? So let me check really quickly. So this is from Sunday evening, April 3rd. He did speak with Foreign Minister Kishida. They exchanged opinions on the full range of bilateral and global issues in advance of the upcoming Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting in Hiroshima. I don't have any more details beyond that.
Is there any concern that Secretary Kerry's visit to Hiroshima and the peace memorials there would be opposition here in the U.S. for that visit?
No, I don't think so. Look, I mean, his intention on visiting this, as I just explained to Matt, is to recognize the huge loss of life that took place during World War II. But I think it's also an acknowledgement that since the end of World War II, that the United States and Japan have become the closest of friends and strong allies. So, I mean, as much as we acknowledge the past, we look to the future, and the fact that since World War II, we've seen, frankly, an era of peace and prosperity in the Pacific region and Asia that was unheralded, and so that's what we want to build on going forward.
Did Secretary Kerry discuss the possibility of President Obama making a visit?
I'm not aware of that, and I wouldn't speak to that. That's really the White House's domain.
Okay. And then finally, sorry.
No worries.
Foreign Minister Kishida said that one of the outcomes that he'd like to see from the foreign ministers meeting in Hiroshima would be the development of a Hiroshima Declaration calling for the end of or a nuclear weapon-free world. Is that something that Secretary Kerry would?
I mean, I can't speak to that specific proposal or deliverable, but as you saw from last week's NSS, certainly this administration, President Obama, have clearly laid out a vision of a nuclear-free world, and it's something that throughout this administration they've been working towards. It's not obviously something that's easily attained, but as the president laid out last week, there has been progress. Please.
Yes. Follow up on Nagorno-Karabakh.
Sure thing. Yeah.
Yesterday, you said that the United States supports a fair and just resolution with the principles of non-use of force, territorial integrity, and self-determination. Now, my question for you today is: Armenia president had threatened to formally recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as an independent state. In the estimation of the United States, do you think it's counterproductive or productive to the peaceful settlement?
So a couple of things. First, I want to just give all of you a brief update, and I'll try to answer your question. The United States does welcome both sides' confirmation of a ceasefire. It's a very nascent ceasefire, but we're encouraged that it does seem to have taken hold. And we are actively engaging with both sides and to urge them to strictly adhere to the ceasefire. I can say that the Minsk Group co-chairs were all in Vienna today, and they briefed the OSCE Permanent Council there. And then these co-chairs, with the support of the Minsk Group, obviously, and the German OSCE chairmanship, are going to travel to the region later today, again, to meet with both sides and encourage them to adhere to the ceasefire and to enter into negotiations on a comprehensive settlement. So as to what that settlement looks like and to what, speaking to President Armenia's comments, I'm not going to wade into that other than to say both leaders, both governments need to come back into the Minsk process. There is an established process here to negotiate a peaceful settlement to Nagorno-Karabakh. We've had a clear breakdown, violation of the existing ceasefire. We now have a new one in place that needs to be adhered to, it needs to be solidified and strengthened. But then obviously what's most urgent is for both sides to get back into the negotiating table.
Yesterday, during Secretary Kerry's phone call with Lavrov, did he ask his Russian counterpart to use Russia's influence over Armenia to dissuade Armenia from doing certain things?
Well, so Russia is a co-chair of the Minsk Group, so we consult with them constantly on how to resolve this and how to get negotiations moving forward. Certainly in any kind of situation like this, we would ask any government to use whatever sway it has or whatever influence it may have over another government. I'm not sure, and I cannot confirm that Secretary Kerry specifically raised this point with Foreign Minister Lavrov yesterday, though. Yeah, sure. Sorry, go
When
ahead.
was the last time the Minsk group actually met in Minsk? You know, offhand?
I do not. I don't. I think it's.
Do they ever
like,
meet in Minsk?
I think what it probably reflects, like it's the Minsk commitments with Ukraine. I think it's just where it was the birthplace of
I
the
know,
group, but
I
I'm
mean,
not
it
sure
just
that
seems
they
odd.
often
Maybe
go
they should
back
give
to
it a
Minsk.
different name.
Valid
Anyway,
point,
the
Matt. I'll
VNF
take it up
group
with
or something. Please do. Can I?
Victoria Nolan.
Can I follow up on
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Obviously, as you say, Moscow and Washington have been pretty much on the same hymn sheet, saying, both sides should calm down. But President Erdogan of Turkey had a different position. He said that the Azeris should win and will win. Do you have any comment on your NATO allies' stance in this conflict? Is it helpful?
I'll just say that we strongly support the Minsk Group process to mediate a fair and just resolution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and that does not include picking sides or picking one side over another. Again, what I just tried to explain to Nike is that what we need are both governments, both leaders, to come back to the negotiating table. So I'm not going to comment on President Erdogan's comments.
Can I move to Iran for a second?
Of course.
Up on the Hill this morning, Undersecretary Shannon was asked about Russia's sales of the S-300 and also proposed sales of the Sukhoi fighters and some tanks. He said that the S-3, as you guys have been saying for some time, you frown on the S-300 sale, but it's not against the rules because it's a defensive system. But he then, as it related to the fighters and the tanks, he said that that would be a violation and that you would veto this at the Security Council. The Russians have said since then, have come back and said that no, it's not a violation. I just wonder, what's your, Undersecretary Shannon's response to the question about whether the U.S. would veto was very brief. I think he just said, yes, we would. Can you offer any more detail about why it is that you, or how it is that you think that it's a violation and that it should be vetoed or it should be stopped?
Well, as you started off, you said that the S-300 is a defensive missile system.
The question is not
right.
really about that.
No,
The
I
question is
understand
about
that. I haven't seen Russia's response to what Ambassador Shannon said up on the Hill today at the SFRC. And I'd have to look in and get you a more detailed response on what we believe, why we believe these particular weapon systems would be in violation of existing
So
sanctions.
you don't,
I don't have an answer
but he
for
was
you.
correct actually that you would move to stop such sales.
If he said yes, then he was correct. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to second guess it.
On Lebanon, the security
sir.
forces have arrested a trafficking in persons ring. Are you aware of this, and do you have any comment?
Sure, I am aware of it. It's actually a pretty horrific story. You're talking about this human trafficking ring that was broken up in Beirut, which had imprisoned dozens of Syrian women who were rescued. First of all, commend the Lebanese security services for rescuing these women and girls and referring them to appropriate non-governmental organizations and humanitarian services there in Beirut. We encourage, of course, Lebanese authorities to conduct a thorough investigation into this matter and all the perpetrators involved in the case and prosecute and convict the offenders as appropriate under Lebanese law. And we are going to continue to monitor closely the vulnerabilities of the Syrian refugee population in the countries to which they flee, which obviously includes Lebanon. I can just say that our Trafficking in Persons office here in 2014 did fund the International Center for Migration Policy Development, which is conducting research on the impact of the Syrian war on trafficking in persons in Syria, as well as neighboring countries. So it's something we've been watching closely. It's just a horrific story. We applaud the Lebanese authorities' quick response.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Still in the region.
Yes, sir.
I've got a couple different subjects, but still in the region. Egypt. You may have seen that the Egyptian authorities moved today to shut down a center that treats torture victims. I presume you have?
I have not.
You have
but
not. Can you look into that and see
I will,
if you guys
certainly.
have anything
I
to say
will,
about
yes.
that? And then
Absolutely.
just
Take the
in
question.
terms of, as it relates to Egypt and the Secretary's trip, I realize he's not going there, and Egypt isn't part of the GCC.
Right.
But do you expect that the situation in Egypt will come up with any of his interlocutors, even if they are not Egyptian?
Are you talking about
On his trip to the
political?
region.
No, but I'm just wondering what aspect of
Well,
Egypt. I mean,
you put out this, he
of course.
himself put out a statement that was expressed very deep concern about the situation there, and I'm just wondering if that's the kind of thing that you would
I
bring
can't
up with
exclude
some of the
that
neighbors.
it would come up on the margins or in some of his bilats on the ground. I don't know that there's any plan to discuss it amongst all the members of the GCC.
And then on Israel,
Yes, sir.
two separate things.
Yes, sir.
One is you might be aware that there's an exhibit going on at the United Nations right now, and the Israelis are complaining that the UN has barred 2 panels from this exhibit, one dealing with Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and another one on Arab Israelis and their role in the life of the country of Israel. I'm wondering, and I know this doesn't directly relate to the United States, but I'm wondering if you have taken any position or view on this decision, and if you're doing anything about it.
We haven't yet. I mean, we're aware of the issue that you raise. Obviously, we weren't involved in the decision to pull any of these panels, so that's a UN issue. I'd have to refer you to them. I have not seen the exhibit, so we weren't involved in the decision. I mean, and speaking broadly about whether we have any opinion, our position on Jerusalem hasn't changed, obviously, the status of Jerusalem. But I can't speak to the specific panels. I just haven't seen them. If we have anything to comment on them, we'll let you know.
I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but
Yep.
the Israelis have approached you for some kind of help or assistance, or and I
I'll
just want to know
double
if-
check that, Matt. I don't
if
have
that
any
is right. And
knowledge
this
of that.
question may be
Yeah.
better directed to UN, but anyway.
Sure.
But
But we'll follow up as well.
the next one, which is related,
sir.
my next question, which is semi-related to this, has to do, well, doesn't have to do with the UN. It doesn't, but it does have to do with the U.S. diplomatic mission in Saudi.
Right.
And this book fair.
Right.
I meant to ask about this yesterday, but we were running short of time.
Yep.
So, were you guys aware of the content of what was in all of the stalls at this book fair? And if so, why was that okay?
So, first of all, this is actually, first of all, we condemn anti-Semitism in all of its forms, as well as any other hate speech. Second is representatives of the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh have participated in the International Riyadh Book Fair for multiple years as part of an effort to essentially distribute books to Saudi citizens that include books about democracy, tolerance, diversity, human rights, etc. The book fair itself is run by the Saudi government's Ministry of Culture and Information. So what I want to clearly state is we were just participant. We weren't aware that these books were going to be featured in this book fair. So we're not a partner, we're not a funder, we're not a sponsor, we're just simply a participant. And we obviously, as I said, condemn any kind of anti-Semitic literature.
Well, do you know if there was any complaint made to the organizers, to the Saudis about
That I
this?
don't know. You mean on our part? I don't know that. I'll check.
Or if you even
I mean, I
regard
just
this
did,
as
but-
something that is, well, yeah, but
Sure,
you
no, I
said-
understand.
you said
I'm
you can- you-
I'm not
you
trying to
said
be
you condemn it
facetious.
in general, but I mean.
Yeah, no,
this
no,
is-
no.
This has been, I remember that
Well,
this has been a problem in the
but-
past, or an issue in the past.
But sorry, I don't
And
mean to
you,
cut you
as
off.
you say, that you participated in this event for multiple years. I can remember this happening before. I mean, do you think that this is something that the U.S. government through the State Department should make an issue of? Take.
Well, I do, and I can say
Saudis?
that I can, just to further clarify, we condemn any anti-Semitic literature that may have been present at this event. As I said, just as we would broadly condemn any anti-Semitic literature or anti-Semitism in all its forms around the world. Again, I'm not aware of the history here. My understanding is that we were not aware that these books were going to be featured at the fair. And I can also check on whether we raised this directly, our concerns with the Saudi government.
Thanks.
Will you
Yep.
attend the fair next year?
I think we would weigh this very heavily, considering this incident.
Well, okay. I mean,
I mean, look,
I
this
get
is-
that
yeah.
answer, but I can remember asking this question in previous years because it seems to be something that
Right.
happens like every
Was it
single.
last year?
Yeah, yes.
I'm not-
I mean, it's
sorry.
not something that is just popped up out of the blue.
No, I
It
understand.
seems to
I
be
understand that.
a
I
recurring
would.
theme here.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Again, our intention, the embassy's intention for participating in this was to use it as
I
a
get
venue
it.
to.
Do you believe, other than than these books that or this literature that you condemned, that in fact the fair does bring books about democracy and pluralism and
Well, sure, because we bring them.
you bring them?
I
What are
can't
the-
speak to
what
the
are the
broader.
sales
No, I
like,
really
I
can't
wonder?
speak to the broader content.
Do
I'd have to
people-
check
do
on
people-
that as well.
Do people buy them?
I'd have to check on that as well. I mean, I think yes. I mean, look, we wouldn't do it if it wasn't a productive engagement with Saudi society. If there was no return, frankly, to our investment of time, whatever, we probably
I
wouldn't
don't
do it.
want to dwell on
So,
this, but
yeah.
when you say you bring those kinds of books, does that mean that the embassy has its own stall? That it's also
Well, we do have. That's again, we have participated in the Riyadh Book Fair,
yeah.
and I believe that includes. So we do have.
So you bring books on, say,
We have a booth at the fair, sell a wide assortment of American books, biography, children books, other materials, study in the U.S., and we do pay a fee for just that space.
right, guides to women's rights.
I can imagine all
that
those
kind of
things,
thing.
Matt. I that's all I got.
It
terms
would be
of
interesting
contents.
it would actually be interesting to see what kind of a sample of what it is that the
We can try to
US
get that for you.
embassy promotes.
can try to
what
get
kind
that
of
for
books
you.
they promote. And
We can try to get that for you.
Thank you.
On
Yes,
Yemen,
sir.
Do you have
On Yemen?
anything on the government shake-up? President Hadi has replaced former deputy president and
Yeah, no, I'd
Prime
refer you to
Minister.
the government of Yemen on that for any questions within changes within the government. Our focus right now is clearly we continue to support this planned nationwide cessation of hostilities. I think it's set for April 10th, and that's in advance of the next round of peace talks. That's where our focus is.
but Mr. Baha has refused these decisions and said that they are unconstitutional.
I don't have any more clarity on that. I can check and see if we have any response to that. But again, I don't think we're going to comment directly on internal processes within the Yemeni government. As I said, our focus is getting the cessation of hostilities into place, delivery of humanitarian assistance, and then peace talks.
Speaking of the
Yes, sir.
internal processes of government, do you have anything, I doubt you do, but do you have anything to say about the resignation of the Prime Minister of Iceland?
Well, I do, in fact.
Oh.
Well, I mean, don't want to overpromise.
What exactly,
like
what
I-
exactly do you have to say?
I don't know, I feel like I'm going to let you down
Are you
now.
ready to convict him of wrongdoing?
Not at all. No, I mean, just to say, we obviously have seen reports. We're closely following political developments in Iceland. We would refer you, obviously, to the government of Iceland for further details. But Iceland is a valued NATO ally. It's a global partner of the United States. We recognize their strong contributions to the NATO mission in Afghanistan. And their
with
partnership
the,
in the counter-ISIL coalition. And Iceland does have a strong commitment to democratic values. We have full confidence that this matter will be handled transparently.
I'm not
and
trying to pick on
in
Iceland
strict
here.
accordance with the rule of law. Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to pick on
That's
Iceland
okay.
here, but as a valued NATO ally, can you recall, what's the size of the Icelandic military?
It's
think
not
it's-
always,
it's-
it's not always a matter of size,
it's-
it's capabilities, Matt.
Right, but I don't think they have one.
I met him.
They have.
I met an
police.
Icelandic soldier in Iraq, and
God bless you for bringing that up right now.
next time I saw the spokeswoman for the government of Iceland, I said, "I met one of your soldiers in Iraq." She said, "Oh, Steinmar." I said, "Yeah, that's him."
All right, well, there you have it.
Again, each NATO member brings unique capabilities, and that's what about,
That
that's a-
certainly is unique, that's for sure.
Does it?
One is very unique.
Mark, do you expect
Yes, sir.
other resignations elsewhere?
I can't predict. Obviously, look. I mean, we're going to refrain from commenting on some of the specific details of these papers, leaked documents, as we do. Beyond what I said yesterday.
Well, actually, on this,
Yes,
is
sir.
kind of interesting. You have in the past, in terms of similar
Have we?
things like, well, with WikiLeaks and with the Snowden stuff,
Right.
you have said that this is not really leaks, this is stolen information. Do you believe that these documents were stolen and that whoever did it should be prosecuted under the Panamanian law?
I think that's a question. Frankly, I don't have the visibility on that. I think it's a question for the Panamanian government to answer.
The French government has added Panama back to its blacklist of countries which are seen as tax havens.
Oh, is that right? I thought you were.
I
thought
didn't
this
know.
was
I didn't know they'd taken them off it, but they've put it back on now, saying that it's a bad place to do business. Maybe it's a question for Treasury, but do you have any plans to review?
It is
financial
mostly a
relations with
question
Panama?
for president. It is a question for Treasury. However, and I did talk about this a little bit yesterday, saying while we're not going to comment on specific findings, we do, and it's the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control would look at this. It's part of their mission to detect and respond to potential sanctions violations. But of course, we would also look at any credible allegations of corruption and take action accordingly. All right, guys? Is that it? Thanks. Yeah, thanks.